The boardroom fell silent. Then the laughter began. It started as a small chuckle from someone near the window. Then another person joined in. Soon, the sound filled the entire glass-walled room like a wave of mockery. At the center of it all stood a woman in a faded blue cleaning uniform. Her name was Auntie Ifioma, though nobody in the building knew that. To them she was just the cleaner. She stood frozen, her mop hanging from one hand. A small yellow bucket sat by her feet. Her uniform was old and worn, hanging loose on her thin frame. One of her shoes had a crack near the front. The other one squeaked softly every time she moved. Her hands were rough and dark from years of scrubbing floors. "Why is she always here during important meetings?" someone whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Another voice cut through, sharper and meaner. "Maybe she wants to learn how real people work." More laughter exploded across the room. Auntie Ifioma lowered her head like she always did. She took one quiet step backward, ready to slip out and disappear. Then a deep voice boomed across the boardroom. "Enough." The single word landed like thunder. The laughter stopped immediately. Every single eye in the room turned toward the head of the table. The CEO stood up slowly. His face was calm, but his eyes were not. He looked around the room with a cold, steady gaze. Then he pointed at the woman they had just mocked. "Before anyone says another word," he said quietly, "look at her. Look very carefully." Nobody understood what was happening. Confusion spread across their faces like ripples on water. 3 months earlier, nobody would have noticed if Auntie Ifioma vanished. She was invisible to them. Every morning she stepped into the tall glass building in Victoria Island while Lagos was still waking up. The air inside was always cold. The floors were always shining. Important people walked fast like time itself was chasing them. Auntie Ifioma pushed her cleaning cart gently, careful not to block anyone's path. She cleaned offices where million-naira deals were discussed. She wiped tables where powerful hands signed papers that changed lives. Yet nobody saw her. Some employees acted like she was air. Others acted like she was dirt. "Cleaner, you missed a spot," one manager once snapped, pointing at a floor that was already clean. Another time, a young executive tripped over his own shoe and spilled coffee. He turned and shouted, "Can't you watch where you're going?" Even though Auntie Ifioma was standing far away, she always said the same thing. "I'm sorry, sir." "I'm sorry, ma." Her voice was soft. Her eyes were calm. She never raised her head. But inside her chest, she carried memories heavy enough to break stone. She had once worn shoes that did not squeak, clothes that did not fade. She had once sat at tables like the one in the boardroom. Only not as a cleaner. Nobody knew that. And that was the point. What secret was this humble cleaner hiding from everyone? Auntie Ifioma listened more than she spoke. She noticed things others missed. The way certain managers whispered in corners. The way smiles disappeared when doors closed. The way greed wore expensive suits and called itself success. They talked freely in front of her. "She won't understand," one man had once said with a laugh. "She can't even speak good English," another replied. Auntie Ifioma cleaned quietly, but she heard everything. She heard plans that were not clean. Lies that were carefully dressed. Betrayals whispered like secrets meant to rot in the dark. Still she said nothing. Her silence was not weakness. It was patience. The worst day came on a Friday. The company was holding an important meeting. Everyone was nervous. Rumors had spread that the CEO was unhappy. Something big was coming. Auntie Ifioma entered the boardroom as usual, pushing her cart slowly. She planned to clean quickly and leave. But before she could turn around, a woman in a red dress laughed loudly. "Is this not a joke?" she said. "Even cleaners want to attend executive meetings now." The room burst into laughter. Auntie Ifioma felt heat rush to her face. She bowed her head and whispered, "I will leave now." But the laughter did not stop. "Wait," a man said. "Maybe she wants to tell us how to mop the company into profit." That was when the CEO stood up. And now the room was silent again. Auntie Ifioma stood still, her heart beating hard. She did not look up. She expected the CEO to ask her to leave, maybe even fire her. She was ready for that. She had survived worse. But instead the CEO took one slow step forward. "Do you know," he said, his voice steady, "that some of you have worked in this company for 10 years and still do not understand it?" People shifted in their seats uncomfortably. "And yet," he continued, "this woman you mocked understands more than you think." Auntie Ifioma's fingers trembled. The CEO turned to her. "Madam," he said gently, "please come forward." Gasps filled the room. Auntie Ifioma hesitated. For the first time in months, she lifted her head fully. When her eyes met his, recognition flashed between them. Fussed. Sure. Dangerous. The CEO nodded once. Tell them, he said softly. Tell them what? Someone whispered nervously. The room leaned forward. Auntie Ifioma took her first step toward the table. Toward a truth that had been buried for far too long. Her feet felt heavy as she walked toward the long glass table. Every step echoed in the silent room. The mop bucket was still behind her, forgotten. Like the life she had been forced to live. All eyes followed her. Some faces showed confusion. Others showed discomfort. A few looked annoyed as if this was a waste of their time. She stopped a few steps away from the CEO. What truth was about to shake the entire company? The CEO turned to the room again. Sit, he said firmly. Everyone obeyed at once. Then he looked back at Auntie Ifioma. Take your time, he said gently. You don't owe anyone fear. That was when the room felt it. A shift. Something invisible but powerful had changed. Auntie Ifioma took a slow breath. Her shoulders straightened. She was still wearing the same old uniform, but something about her posture was different now. Stronger. Steadier. Before she could speak, a man near the end of the table scoffed. With all due respect, sir, he said, forcing a laugh. This is getting strange. She's just a cleaner. We have real matters to discuss. The CEO's eyes snapped toward him. Just a cleaner? He repeated calmly. Yes, the man replied, shrugging. I mean, stop, the CEO said sharply. The man fell silent immediately. The CEO walked slowly around the table, his hands clasped behind his back. This, he said, is exactly why this meeting matters. He turned to Auntie Ifioma again. Tell them how you came here, he said. The cleaner swallowed. Her voice was quiet at first but clear. I came here the same way many people come to Lagos, she said. With hope. A few people shifted in their chairs uncomfortably. I was not always a cleaner, she continued. I once worked in this company before this building was even completed. A sharp intake of breath spread across the room. Someone whispered, what? Auntie Ifioma lifted her chin. I helped start it. The room erupted. That's impossible. She must be lying. This is madness. The CEO raised his hand and silence returned. It is not madness, he said. It is history. Auntie Ifioma's eyes glistened, but she did not cry. Years ago, she said, I was a partner. A silent one. I invested everything I had. My savings. My trust. Her hands shook slightly as she spoke. But when things went wrong, she continued, I was blamed. When documents disappeared, I was accused. When money was stolen, I was pushed aside. Some executives looked down. Others looked shocked. I was forced out, Auntie Ifioma said quietly. No court. No justice. I lost everything in 1 month. The CEO nodded slowly. She disappeared, he added. Not because she failed, but because powerful people made sure she did. A woman in the red dress stood up suddenly. This is ridiculous, she snapped. If this were true, why didn't she fight back? Auntie Ifioma turned to her calmly. Because I was tired, she said. And because I needed to survive. The room fell quiet again. So I cleaned houses, Auntie Ifioma went on. I washed clothes. I scrubbed floors. And when I heard this company needed cleaners, I applied. Murmurs spread like fire through the room. You came back here on purpose? Someone asked in disbelief. Yes, she replied. To spy? Another voice accused. No, she said softly. To remember. To see what the company had become. Why would she return to the place that destroyed her life? The CEO stepped beside her. And what she saw, he said, was worse than we imagined. He pressed a button on the remote. The screen behind him lit up. Emails appeared. Messages. Hidden accounts. Dates. Names. Gasps filled the room. Auntie Ifioma watched quietly as panic spread across faces that once laughed at her. You mocked her, the CEO said, his voice rising. You insulted her. And all this time, she was watching you expose yourselves. He turned to Auntie Ifioma again. Are you ready? He asked. She nodded once. I am, she said. But as the CEO prepared to reveal the next truth, the door to the boardroom suddenly swung open. A security guard rushed in, breathless. Sir, he said urgently. There's a problem downstairs. Every head turned. What kind of problem? The CEO asked. The guard swallowed hard. Someone is trying to stop this meeting. The lights flickered. Auntie Ifioma felt a cold chill run down her spine. She knew what this meant. Someone was desperate. And desperate people were dangerous. The lights flickered again once, twice before returning to full brightness. No one laughed this time. The security guard stood stiff by the door, breathing hard. "They're insisting," he said. "They say this meeting must stop now." The CEO's jaw tightened. "Who is they?" he asked calmly. The guard hesitated. "Some senior shareholders, sir. They're very angry." Auntie Ifioma felt it then. The fear in the room. It moved like a wave, touching faces one after another. The same people who had mocked her minutes ago were now uneasy, shifting in their seats, avoiding eye contact. The CEO gave a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Tell them," he said, "that the meeting will continue." The guard nodded and left quickly, pulling the door shut behind him. Silence returned, but it was heavier now. Auntie Ifioma stood quietly, her hands folded in front of her. Her heart was beating fast, but her face stayed calm. She had lived through storms before. This was not the first time powerful people tried to silence her. The CEO turned back to the room. "Some of you already know why this woman frightens certain people," he said. "Others will understand very soon." He clicked the remote again. The screen changed. This time it showed a younger woman standing in an old office, smiling confidently, holding a file close to her chest. Auntie Ifioma. But she looked different. Younger. Stronger. Proud. Gasps rippled through the room like electricity. "That was her," the CEO said. 15 years ago. A man named Mr. Emeka near the table shook his head slowly. "No, no. That can't be." Auntie Ifioma finally spoke again. "I was called Ifioma Okoro then," she said. "I helped design the company's first structure. I handled staff training. I knew every department." She paused. Her voice dropped. "And I trusted the wrong people." Her eyes drifted to the far end of the table. A man there stiffened. His name was Mr. Namdi. He was older now, with gray hair at his temples, but his expensive suit could not hide the fear in his eyes. Who was this man, and what had he done to destroy Auntie Ifioma's life? "You," Auntie Ifioma said quietly, looking directly at Mr. Namdi. All heads turned. The man forced a smile. "I don't know what game this is," he said, laughing nervously. "You're mistaken." The CEO did not smile. "You were head of finance," he said coldly. "You signed the transfer." Mr. Namdi's smile cracked like broken glass. Auntie Ifioma took a slow step forward. "You told me to wait," she said. "You said the papers were being corrected. You said my name would be restored." Her voice remained calm, but the pain behind it was deep and real. "And while I waited," she continued, "you erased me." The room felt smaller. Tighter. Mr. Namdi stood up suddenly. "This is unfair," he shouted. "You have no proof." The CEO pressed another button. Bank records appeared on the screen. Dates. Amounts. Offshore accounts in Port Harcourt and Abuja. Mr. Namdi froze like a statue. "You stole from the company," the CEO said, and blamed her. A woman named Mrs. Chidinma began to cry softly. Another executive named Mr. Segan whispered, "My God." Auntie Ifioma closed her eyes for a moment. This was the part she had prepared for, but it still hurt like a fresh wound. "When I lost everything," she said quietly, "I lost my home. I lost friends. I lost my voice." She opened her eyes and looked around the room. "But I did not lose my memory." Her gaze swept across the table like a searchlight. "And I did not lose my dignity." The CEO stepped closer to her. "She returned here not for revenge," he said, "but for truth." Mr. Adekunle, who had mocked her earlier, lowered his head in shame. Mrs. Blessing in the red dress looked pale as paper. "I watched you all," Auntie Ifioma continued. "How you treated cleaners, drivers, interns, anyone you thought was small." Her voice grew firmer and stronger. "I realized something," she said. She paused and looked at each person. "You are not powerful," she said clearly. "You are just loud." The words landed hard like heavy stones. Suddenly, a phone buzzed loudly on the table. Everyone jumped. The CEO glanced at the screen, then frowned deeply. His expression changed completely. "This," he said slowly, "just became more serious." He looked up at the room with grave eyes. "The person who tried to stop this meeting," he said, "has just frozen all company accounts." Gasps exploded across the room like fireworks. "We can't access funds," someone shouted. "My department. This is illegal." The CEO raised his hand for silence. "And it confirms everything," he said. Auntie Ifioma felt a knot tighten in her chest. She knew this move. It was the last card. The desperate card. And desperate people did not go down quietly. The CEO turned to her and spoke softly, but the whole room heard. "They are fighting back now," he said. "Are you still ready?" Auntie Ifioma lifted her chin high. "Yes," she said firmly. What final truth would bring justice after 15 long years? The room buzzed with panic. Phones were unlocked at the same time. Fingers shook as executives tried to log into company systems. Some stood up. Others whispered urgently to the people beside them. The confidence they once wore like expensive perfume was completely gone. Auntie Ifioma watched quietly. This was the moment she had imagined many nights while scrubbing floors long after everyone had gone home. Yet now that it was here, it felt heavier than she expected. The CEO raised his voice. "Sit down," he commanded. Slowly, reluctantly, everyone obeyed. "The accounts were frozen from outside this room," he continued. "Which means the problem is not just about the past. It is happening now." He turned to Auntie Ifioma. "This is why I asked you to stay silent for so long," he said. "This is why I asked you to observe." Some faces turned toward her with fear now. Not mockery. Fear. "You knew?" Mr. Olu asked in disbelief. "Yes," the CEO replied. "She knew. And so did I." Auntie Ifioma took a slow breath. "When I returned as a cleaner," she said, "I did not know who was still involved. I needed time." She looked at her rough hands. Time to watch. Time to listen. Time to understand how deep the rot had gone. Her eyes lifted and met theirs. And it went very deep. The CEO clicked the remote again. This time the screen showed recent footage. Recordings from hallways, offices, and private meeting rooms. Voices filled the silent room. "Once the funds are moved, no one will trace it back to us. She's gone. Nobody will believe a cleaner. We'll stop the meeting if we have to." Gasps filled the air like sharp knives. Mr. Cunnell stood up abruptly. "This is a legal recording." "It is legal when it protects the company," the CEO replied coldly. "And when it exposes thieves." Auntie Ifioma felt her chest tighten. She had cleaned those same hallways while those words were spoken. She had wiped tables while plans were made to steal, lie, and destroy. "They talked freely," she said softly, "because they thought I was invisible." Her voice hardened like steel. They were wrong. Mr. Namdi, who had been accused earlier, began to sweat heavily. "This is a setup," he said desperately. "You planned this together?" "Yes," the CEO replied without hesitation. "I did." The room went completely still. "I found her," the CEO continued, "not as a cleaner but as a name missing from old files. A name that should never have disappeared." He looked at Auntie Ifioma with deep respect. She agreed to return quietly to see who would reveal themselves. Auntie Ifioma nodded. And many did. Mrs. Chidinma began to sob openly. "I only followed orders," she cried. "I didn't know how bad it was." Auntie Ifioma looked at her gently but firmly. "But you laughed," she said. "You laughed when I was mocked." The woman lowered her head in shame. The CEO turned serious again. "Lawyers are on the way," he said. "Authorities too." Panic exploded throughout the room. "You can't do this. You'll ruin us. Think of the company image." Auntie Ifioma felt something rise inside her. Not anger, not joy, but strength, pure strength. "You ruined yourselves," she said quietly but powerfully. Within days everything changed. News spread across Lagos and Abuja. Executives were arrested. Mr. Namdi confessed everything. The company was cleaned from top to bottom. And Auntie Ifioma? She was restored as a founding partner and made chair of the ethics board. She stood before all the staff one morning and said something they would never forget. "This uniform does not define a person," she said, touching her old cleaning dress. "A job does not measure worth. When you mock the weak, you reveal your own weakness." Her voice softened. "I forgive, but I will not forget." The building felt different after that day. Cleaners were greeted by name. Drivers were respected. Everyone mattered. One young intern asked her weeks later, "Ma, why did you stay silent for so long?" Auntie Ifioma smiled gently. "Because silence is powerful when used wisely," she said. "And because the truth always finds its time." She walked through the glass halls, no longer the poor cleaner they mocked, but the woman who showed them who she truly was. We've come to the end of today's story. I hope it touched your heart. Thanks for watching and staying with us till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?